Hey everybody, we're Workforce Gaming. I'm Doug, along with Brad.
Hello.
And Brad recently picked up a Switch.
Woo!
I just got that text. I just really got that text. It's like a photo. I was like, I got a Switch. It's like, oh, okay, all right, sure.
I broke down and did it. It was one of those. It was one of those like, oh, they have one at the store I go to. Fine.
Yeah, I had recently got like an unexpected bonus. I was like, I could afford one, but so let's talk about Zelda because every time there's certain games that we'll talk about, and I'm like, I might get this depending on what Brad says, and that's what happened to Horizon Zero Dawn. Is I bought it like right after you talked about it.
hmm
So Zelda is apparently like uh, people are like I'm not sure this is like amount of hyperbole, so maybe you could this is the easiest way to cut to the chase. Like people are saying like this is one of the best games ever made. So I guess it's a good place to start there. Maybe it's
Yes.
okay.
Without question, this is one of the best games I've ever played in my life
I,
for a
mhm.
million different reasons.
So is this hitting your favorite list or best game? What list is that on?
Both.
Okay, damn.
Well, I think because there's a difference between like this is a 10 out of 10 game. It is perfect in every way and it's fine and not very fun, but I like it and it's there's that
Yeah.
and then there's like the stupid dumb games that you're like this is not a great game, but I could play this game for hours and hours and hours and this hits both.
Oh,
Because
jeez.
this is legitimately like just a flawlessly made game, completely like if I would have to probably sit down and play this game for several hours to come up with a flaw.
Jeez.
That's probably a bit exaggerated, but and at the same time it is fun. Everything you do is fun. It is the prettiest game I've ever seen, which feels weird saying that about a Switch game
What?
because the draw distance is crazy, just the textures on everything, the way everything looks, the way things move. I mean, the clouds, the nighttime shifts, everything looks just perfect. And not in like that, like definitely not in the photorealistic way,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
in
of course.
that just this is a world that looks alive. Like just looking around, you can just tell like things are moving. There's wind blowing things. The clouds are moving. Like just everything looks alive.
I mean, you're saying that like I'm not sure like immediately like put a counterpoint but like better than Horizon. Like Horizon
Yeah.
is sort of like that. Okay, I need to. I gotta play
Yes.
this game.
I okay. Well. Okay. Well. Here's what I'll say. Okay. So
Yeah, yeah,
Horizon, yes. I think if you look in terms of like HDs and 1080s and pixels and whatever,
yeah,
it is probably just the better looking game.
yeah,
But in terms of to get into Doug shit, art style
yeah.
and the way it
Aesthetics.
looks and the way it feels and just the way things are designed is just great. And there's so many like little places. So I mean, you're running through a forest and the trees are thick and there's fog and then you run out of it and there's just like the sun in the background and you can just see for miles in every directions and you see the volcanoes on the like off to your right and you see the desert off to your left and you just get this giant world view with the castle situated in the middle and
Hmm.
oh, it's so pretty.
So okay, I mean, like I don't yeah, because this game's such like a weird like open-ended game. It's kind of like hard to even figure out like where to start from. I mean, I guess okay. I mean, before you because I know you'd bought a Switch. I know we had sort of talked about you were kind of excited for Zelda, but I think we were both kind of like I don't know, man. This could be a good game. I mean, people are saying it's good, but I mean, like kind of like what was the point where you had like certain expectations going in that were like something like okay, this is actually a really good game. Like what at what point did that happen?
I think well, as soon as I turned it on, just I I will admit I'm not the biggest Zelda fan. Other than Ocarina of Time, this is now the only Zelda game I've beat other than that one
Oh wow,
because
yeah.
I get bored with them.
Hmm.
Like with the new exception of this one. So just even turning it on, just the feeling it gives you, just because the way the story's laid out
Hmm.
is, and these are like first 5 minute spoilers,
Yeah.
is you've been asleep for 100 years and
Okay.
you wake up and people are talking to you and you're trying to figure out what's going on and where you need to go and you meet up with a couple characters in the first little bit that kind of give you a little bit of very basic direction and you're like, oh man, like you're looking around and it looks kind of like desolate and there's some broken things, structures and stuff around where you first wake up and
Hmm.
you're like, oh, this is kind of desolate. And then one of the first times you get to the first town and you get to in between the town and where you are is the first stable. So you're just kind of randomly exploring, and I was on the top of a mountain. I just looked down and there's this campfire in this little tiny building, and you fly down and there's a horse stable, and it's just in the middle of this giant prairie with a river going past it. And you just get this feeling like, wow, this is like a huge thing. It was, I mean, probably within the first hour I went, this is a 10 out of 10 game. And then I
Yeah,
think just it's one of those games that, you know, gets better as you build to it. And as you go through and you get to the first boss, and the first boss is super intense, and just you got to figure out, you know, all the different tricks to beating it. And the bosses are balanced so perfectly where it's that I feel like a boss that you beat the first time is not a good boss, and a boss
yeah.
that takes you 30 tries is not a good boss.
Yeah, yeah.
There's like that sweet spot of like 4 to 7 tries
Oh, okay, yeah,
where
yeah.
you kind of just enough to get the pattern recognition, just enough to figure out what they're doing. Every single boss fits right in that sweet spot where it's not super difficult, but it's not a okay, yep, I just mashed A and he's dead.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So even getting that first boss fight is cool, and just the way the temples are set up, which are these giant like mythical creatures, as you're going and finding these champions, and the way those things kind of tie back in with the history of Hyrule, and you're all the time you're learning the history almost in a very Horizon sense.
Yeah.
Thinking about that comparison, there's a lot of overlap with Aloy and Link in this, and just in the terms of what they're doing and what they're looking for and how they're approaching the things that are going on in this world. There's a lot of similarities between the two that I didn't really think about until right now. Um, but just, and as you play it, the combat is great. The whole idea of like weapons breaking, I know is an issue that a lot of people had, but it works. It makes sense. The Master Sword's a little bit different with that, because that was my thing of thinking like, well, how does the Master Sword work then? Because this is like the all powerful sword and it's just gonna break. But even that, there's a very well explained way the way that whole thing plays out in the end. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's a great game, and it's you can do whatever you want
Mhm.
whenever you want, and it kind of opens everything up after maybe 45 minutes. It just is like, okay, have fun. And
Yeah.
you get very limited directions of just you need to find these mythical creatures or these mythical beasts, and you need to
Yeah.
go find them, and one's up here somewhere and one's over here somewhere and one's over here somewhere. Just go find them.
At some point, like, because I just know how you play open world games, you usually like to beeline it through the story. Like, did you do that in this one, or
Nope.
did you? Yes or no?
No.
Oh,
There was
whoa.
like cool stuff to find, and like again, like the history parts, like there's different memory points, so you kind of have these pictures, and it's like, oh yeah, when you find these points, like it'll trigger these past memories. So kind of wandering around trying to find those. It's
Mhm.
got the tower climbing like you'd have in Assassin's Creed, so that opens up and gives you a view or gives you a view of the map. The way you earn hearts in this are little tiny like puzzle room dungeon things, and you can kind of see them off from a distance because they have this little glow in the way that they look. So you know you kind of see those and you want to run over there.
Mhm.
And of course, like I want to try and get the Master Sword before I was done. You have to do X number of those things to get to a point where you have access to that place, or you have access to the ability, because it does a very cool thing when you get the Master Sword that I want to talk about. But
Yeah.
um, it's one of those things where every single thing you do is fun. Like it's fun to climb these towers, and as you go through, some of them have enemies and things that'll kind of shoot at you, and some are, you know, you kind of got to work around. So there's one that you have to climb up the mountain behind it and then jump off the mountain onto the top of the tower. And there are different
Oh, that's
ways, more
cool.
so than just like, hey, here's a tower in the middle, climb to the top. There's
Mhm.
one that's surrounded by water, so you have to kind of swim, but as you're swimming there's stuff in the water and there's enemies around the water, so you have to try and swim and dodge these enemies and still get to the tower. And a lot of them, once you get some of your special abilities, you can kind of cheat that a little bit. So some of it's like, well, do I want to try now, do I want to come back? And
Yeah.
it's so good.
Because I think like one of the things like with open world games that I kind of have like issue with, I guess with climbing towers is a good example because I played Far Cry 4, and it felt like every tower was like very similar. How like I would say the configurations were like slightly different, but does it feel like everything is kind of like more handmade instead of just
Yeah.
like you said?
And
So like does every I mean after a while does those like do those puzzles start feeling redundant, or does everything like feel like you have to approach it in like slightly
um
different way?
the puzzles, yes, because they kind of fall into a couple categories of like more combat based, more puzzle based, more using a specific one of your abilities based. So
Hmm.
those do to a bit, but it never got to a point where I didn't want to do them. Like you get in some of those other ones where it's like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, I'll come back to that later. It was always, ooh, one of these, and they're spread out enough that there's a ton of them. I don't remember the exact number of how many there are in there, but they're spread out enough because the map is gigantic that you only come across one once every maybe 10, 20, 30 minutes if you're just kind of exploring, unless you're looking for them specifically.
Okay.
And the towers, there's only, I want to say maybe 10 or so towers in the game.
Yeah.
And again, those are all approached differently. So
Oh,
again, I talked
okay.
about the one on the mountain, the one that's in the middle of a lake. There's, there's just one in the middle of like a field. There's one kind of on the side of a volcano. There's one that, you've got to manage your items because there's a couple areas where it's too hot and you've got a temperature gauge. And if it's too hot, you'll just start dying. So you have to go get fire clothes and you have to get, like all this other stuff. Every system in this works perfectly. And
Hmm.
just because every part of this, every area is handled in a slightly different way. Every tower is a little different. Every temple is a little different.
Yeah.
It never gets that stale feeling, which is my biggest complaint with open world games and why
Yeah.
most of the time I do just go straight through the story because it's, okay, great. I've checked off this box 34 times. Great. But
Hmm.
each one of these does, I think you kind of nailed it there where it's very purposefully made, very artistically made. Everything has a reason for where it is, even in this giant world.
Okay. No, 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 that's cool because I think that is like one of the things that we both sort of talk about with open world games, like you said, like that sort of redundancy after, like once you start to see the game, like the gameplay, like mechanics
Mm-hmm.
working, you're like, oh, okay, and
Yeah,
I get how this works. It's cool the first time you climb a tower in Assassin's Creed. It's not cool the 100th time you do it, but I'm
yeah,
glad they kind of mix it up a bit. I guess this is kind of unrelated to Zelda, but did you play it in TV mode or handheld mode most of it?
both.
Both. Okay. All right.
I'd say probably 75 TV mode, probably 25 handheld.
Oh, okay. Because I
Um,
was just curious because I thought like to me like this would be a super impressive handheld game, and I just don't know if it like holds up on a
it
do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean?
I will tell you, I specifically stopped if I was playing in handheld mode where I got to anything that looked like it was going to be really cool. So like
Oh, okay.
when I got to like, oh, I got to the next boss fight. Okay, I'm gonna put this down and I'm gonna play the boss on the TV just because
Oh,
it
that's pretty
looks
cool.
so good and I love seeing it on the TV. I love seeing it big and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
then a lot of what I did is like, you know what, I'm just gonna explore for a bit. So take it in handheld mode, turn on, hockey, football, baseball, whatever it was, and just sit here and play Zelda while I'm watching that.
Oh, okay.
Um so most of the big moments are in the TV, but because again, this Zelda has like cutscenes that are really well done, and it has voice acting that's really well done. So it actually has these scenes that are really memorable. And I don't know. I've always struggled with handheld games with like stuff like that because it's like, why is this so small and quiet? And I want it big and giant and a big experience with it. So I did go back and forth. I didn't notice any differences playing
Mhm.
TV or handheld mode really. I mean, I'm not super into the technical like, oh, that's 29 instead of 30 frames or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
so I mean, I know that was something that came up, but as somebody who's not super invested in that stuff, I could not tell you the difference.
Oh, yeah, I was more just asking from a perspective because like there's certain games I just like to play on handhelds more than I like to play on a TV.
Yeah. Oh
Like
yeah.
Odin Spheres, I think is a great handheld game. That game is probably boring as hell if you play it on a console in front of your TV all day. So I just didn't know if like how Zelda sort of fit into
Oh
that.
yeah. It whenever I was playing it on a handheld, it felt like something I could play on a handheld. It never felt like, oh, this is too big for this. Like the way the screen scales down, it still renders everything. It still feels like you can see everything.
Yeah.
And then putting it on the TV, it's never that like, ugh, I should just be playing this in front of me. Like, why is this on the TV? Because it is such a gorgeous game. Because it does have those cool moments.
Yeah.
It works perfectly on both, I think.
Dang.
I
So
love this game.
game of the year.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
No hesitation. Like game of the year, decade. Like, yeah, no, for sure. Like easily. I mean, it's better than Horizon. It's better than whatever else is going to be on my game of the year list that I can't think of.
Yeah, I was trying to think of my own reasons. I was like Horizon. Okay, it kind of ends there weirdly.
I mean, I've got a couple other ones like Horizon, Edith Finch, the new Uncharted. Like those are all up there. This is better than all of them. I'll be curious
Jeez.
to see where Mario fits in with this, but
Yeah,
yeah,
because you're getting that day. I assume you had that pre-order all ready to go and all
I pre-ordered that about 10 minutes after I bought my Switch.
that. Yeah, that Mario pack is kind of staring at me. If they had a Mario Zelda pack, then I'd be like, oh
Done.
boy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's a game that I really don't think anybody can miss, and it's a game that I feel like even though the Switch isn't necessarily kind of that next gen thing, it does feel like something that I'd be very curious to know how this thing runs on the Wii U because it feels like this thing is just this brand new thing, and just
Mhm.
seeing Nintendo take a game in this direction is so cool.
Yeah, no, it looks incredible. I hope they do more. And Mario Odyssey seems to seem like that's like
Yes.
reinvention of Mario as well. I'm curious. I'm curious how that's going to carry over to other franchises because I think outside of those two, I haven't really seen. Well,
Yeah,
we'll
because
see. We'll see.
because Yoshi and Kirby so far just look like more Yoshi and
Shane
Kirby.
Kirby, yeah.
I mean, Metroid Prime 4 is going to be that might be the next one that I think you see some weird jump like this from what that
Hmm.
was to what it could be now. So we'll
Yeah,
see.
no, yeah, I'm excited. Yeah, we'll definitely see. Pokemon, that'll be the big one.
Yeah, yep, that'll be a good one too.
All right. We are Workforce Gaming. If you guys like what you hear, you can follow us at Workforce Gaming or subscribe to us on YouTube. We'll see you guys next week.
So yeah.